Part 37. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Len. Chapter 361. Fen Lingyuan looked in the direction of the disciple's finger, and suddenly found a magnificent building suspended in the void in front of him. It was carved with dragons and phoenixes, resplendent and magnificent, and revealed an extremely majestic aura. This palace is so spectacular, Fen Lingyuan praised secretly, with deep curiosity rising in his heart. This majestic building complex must contain the most precious treasures of the Qin dynasty, and it may even contain the inheritance of the successive emperors of the Qin dynasty, or the secrets of the ruins. Thinking of these, Fen Lingyuan's mood suddenly surged, and his whole heart beat wildly, as if a flame was burning. He could not wait to rush into the palace immediately, search for the inheritance of the previous kings of Qin, and seize the country they had worked so hard to create. Now that we have met, I naturally want to go in and see what's inside. Fen Lingyuan narrowed his eyes slightly, with a playful arc at the corner of his mouth. The next moment, he led his disciples out of the dragon beast chariot and walked slowly towards the magnificent buildings in front, neither too fast nor too slow. Wait a moment. However, at this moment, Fairy Yuetian gave a sweet drink. Fen Lingyuan stopped, turned around and looked at Fairy Yuetian, wondering, "Chan'er, what's wrong with you?" Fairy Yuetian frowned, glanced around with solemn eyes, and reminded, "Let's get out of here first." "Why?" Fen Lingyuan asked, puzzled. "There is danger," Fairy Yuetian said seriously, her pretty face full of seriousness. It was obvious that she was not joking. Seeing this, Fen Lingyuan frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Danger? What danger can there be?" Fairy Yuetian didn't say much nonsense, but said quickly and nervously, "Let's step back for the time being, and it won't be too late to go over after we investigate clearly." Fen Lingyuan was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly and said, "Chan'er, you underestimate the strength of our Fenglay pavilion. As long as I am here, any enemy who attacks will be killed. Besides, my strength is far better than yours. If an enemy attacks, I can respond immediately," Fen Lingyuan vowed. Hearing this, Fairy Yuetian knitted her dark eyebrows into a straight line, with a look of anxiety on her beautiful face, and said, "Brother Yun, I'm not joking with you, my intuition tells me that there is danger approaching." However, before she could finish speaking, Fen Lingyuan interrupted with a wave of his hand and said with a smile, Okay, don't be afraid. I will protect you. If anyone dares to hurt you, I will kill him." After the words fell, Fen Lingyuan flipped his right palm and took out the Qing Feng sword. The thick and powerful spiritual power surged crazily. The sword body suddenly shone with dazzling brilliance, and a soul-stirring cold light bloomed out. "Brother Yun," Fairy Yuetian's pretty face turned pale. She quickly grabbed Fen Lingyuan's arm and stopped her. "Brother Yun, listen to my advice. Let's leave quickly. There must be danger here." "With me here, there will be no problem," Fen Lingyuan said calmly, not taking Fairy Yuetian's words to heart at all, and walked straight towards the majestic palaces ahead. Seeing this scene, Fairy Yuetian was in a state of confusion, her mind filled with uncalmable emotions, and she became increasingly anxious. "No. I can't leave Brother Yun behind." Thinking of this, Fairy Yuetian gritted her teeth and stamped her feet, and immediately caught up with Fen Lingyuan. She grabbed his arm with her jade hand and said firmly, "Brother Yun, promise me you will not take any risks." Fen Lingyuan looked down at Fairy Yuetian and grinned, "Silly girl, don't worry. In Chang'an City, I, Fen Lingyuan, am truly domineering. Look at all the people on the street. They all respect me. Don't you believe in my strength? Besides, Chang'an City has long been conquered by the elders. We are going to meet the elders, not to fight with other forces. There will be no danger." As Fen Lingyuan spoke, he looked down, preparing to enjoy the awe-inspiring looks of the people in Chang'an City. However, the next moment, he suddenly froze. Below, tens of thousands of great Qin cultivators were seen looking up at him with strange eyes, shaking their heads, and even pointing, as if they were looking at a fool. Where did this fool come from? He actually went to Chang'an City to show off. I guess he is a country bumpkin from the outside world. He dares to talk about conquering Chang'an City. He is simply ignorant. I've seen this kind of people a lot. Every time I arrive in Chang'an City, I always think I have a few kilograms, but I end up being scared to death, haha. I don't know who gave him the courage to go to Chang'an City and act wild. I just don't know how Chang'an City is something that a country bumpkin like him can provoke. The crowd talked a lot, looked contemptuous, and all their eyes turned to Feng Lingyuan. Feng Lingyuan's face was stiff and his expression was extremely embarrassing. Not only was Feng Lingyuan confused, but even the Fenglay Pavilion disciples were stagnant. They thought that these Dechin monks would be trembling with fear, but they didn't expect that they looked like they were watching a show and didn't take Feng Lingyuan seriously at all. What shocked them even more was that when the people and cultivators in Chang'an City saw them, they also had a weird smile on their faces, as if to say, "Look, here comes another group of big wretches." This makes them feel baffled. The Fenglay Pavilion disciples looked at each other with confusion on their faces, unable to figure out what was going on. Fairy Yueshan's pretty face became even paler, and she said worriedly, "Brother Yun, listen to me, let's retreat first and wait until the investigation is clear before we go over." "First kill those annoying guys," Feng Lingyuan said coldly, his eyes were cold to the bone, making people shudder. "You." Fairy Yueshan started to speak, but when the words reached her lips, she swallowed them back and could only say helplessly, "It's up to you." Buzz. Just as Feng Lingyuan and the others were talking, a terrifying and vast coercion enveloped the entire imperial city, causing the space to tremble slightly. The expressions of Feng Lingyuan and others suddenly changed, and their hearts beat suddenly. They could clearly feel the overwhelming pressure sweeping over them, making it difficult for them to breathe. Their energy and blood were disordered, making them extremely uncomfortable. The most important thing is that the pressure is spreading towards them. What on earth is going on?" The Fenglay Pavilion disciple's face instantly turned pale as paper. "Oops," Fairy Yueshan's face changed drastically, and she said in panic, "It seems they are coming for us, let's go quickly." As she spoke, Fairy Yueshan pulled Feng Lingyuan and retreated to the rear without any hesitation. The next moment, a woman in white was seen walking slowly out of the palace, flying through the air. The surrounding scene quickly reversed, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of them. She put her hands behind her back and stared at Feng Lingyuan and Fairy Yueshan as if she were overlooking all living beings. Her eyes were full of disdain for the world, as if nothing in the world could escape her control. "Who are you?" Fairy Yueshan asked in astonishment. The woman in white did not answer, but raised the corner of her mouth slightly. "You are good looking. I heard that Qin Mu likes fairies the most, so I will use you as a sign of cooperation. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 362. Fairy Yueshan. Feng Lingyuan. "I have an opportunity for you now, are you willing to accept it?" The woman in white looked at Fairy Yueshan in front of her and said calmly. "Who are you?" Fairy Yueshan looked at the woman in white with a vigilant look. "You don't have to care who I am, you just need to know that there is a great opportunity in front of you. As long as you choose to agree, your future achievements will definitely not be limited to this." As the woman in white spoke, a faint light emanated from her body, enveloping her, mysterious and powerful. "The opportunity you are talking about is the so-called Pledge of Allegiance," Fairy Yueshan asked doubtfully. The woman in white smiled and nodded. "Yes, for me it is a token of surrender, for you it is a great opportunity, you will definitely thank me in the future." Without waiting for Fairy Yueshan to say anything, Feng Lingyuan could no longer bear it. He gritted his teeth and asked with anger in his heart. Fairy, my name is Fen Lingyun, and I am the young master of Fenglay Pavilion. I don't know who the fairy is. We haven't offended you, right? He didn't expect that someone would dare to hit on his fiancée, Fairy Yueshan, and even said that he would use his fiancée as a token of surrender. This is simply not taking him seriously at all. If the other party was not very powerful and suppressed him so that he couldn't move at all, and he hadn't figured out the other party's background yet. Otherwise, he would definitely fight with the other party now. Hearing this, the woman in white looked at Fen Lingyun, looked at him carefully for a few times, and then shook her head and said, "You are just a skin bag, and your qualifications are also very poor, just like a waste. You." Fen Lingyun almost spit out a mouthful of old blood. This woman is too arrogant. He is the young master of Fenglay Pavilion, the leader of the young generation of Tiankai domain, the gifted young supreme, the future emperor. How could he be insulted like this? What a shame. This is a naked humiliation. The disciples of Fenglay Pavilion were also full of anger and resentment. But they dared not make any move, because they felt that they were bound and could not move at all. The woman in white did not care about the angry eyes of these people at all, and continued to say to Fairy Yueshan, "I don't like to force others, and I don't like to bully the weak, so you'd better agree to it yourself, so that everything will be fine." Although she has decided to give this woman to Qin Mu, she doesn't want to force it unless she has to. After all, they are both female creatures. After hearing the words of the woman in white, Fen Lingyun's face suddenly became ugly, and he said coldly, "Haha, since you don't like to force others, why bother us?" This sentence obviously carries a strong sense of sarcasm. The woman in white smiled disapprovingly, glanced at him sideways again, shook her head, and said in the same sarcastic tone, "Little girl, this man looks so ordinary and his strength is not up to par. How could you like him? You were not deceived by him, were you? I advise you to wake up quickly. What you really like should be a handsome, powerful person who can help you. Not this kind of trash." Fen Lingyun's face turned pale when he heard this, and his lungs were about to explode. He had never been so angry as today. "You." Fen Lingyun was about to lose his temper, and Fairy Yueshan's pretty face also turned red, biting her cherry lips with her pearly teeth, and said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense, my brother Yun is not a waste, he is the best boy I have ever seen." Fen Lingyun's own sweetheart commented on him like this, and his angry heart finally felt a little comforted. Then he stared at the woman in white and said gloomily, "What do you want to do? You bully me like this, aren't you afraid of my revenge?" "Revenge?" The woman in white raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Do you think you are worthy of revenge against me? Do you believe that I will let the elders kill you right away?" Fen Lingyun stared at the woman in white fiercely. "Oh, really?" The woman in white suddenly showed a bright smile on her face and said, "If you really dare, I will accompany you to the end." "You?" Fen Lingyun was furious and gritted his teeth and said, "Just wait for me, my Fenglay Pavilion will not let you go. Quick, notify the elders and ask them to come quickly." Fen Lingyun shouted at the disciples of Fenglay Pavilion. "Ah, young master, I just tried to contact the elders, but I couldn't contact them." The disciple of Fenglay Pavilion replied tremblingly. "Then find a way," Fen Lingyun roared, and he vowed to catch this guy who dared to offend his fiancée and torture him severely. "Yes. Yes. Yes," the Fenglay Pavilion disciples responded immediately. "He," the woman in white sneered. Looking at the smile on the woman's face, she was obviously beautiful, but Fen Lingyun felt a chill in her smile. This feeling was very uncomfortable. It seemed that something extremely dangerous was approaching him, and he might lose his life at any time. The fear that rose in Fen Lingyun's heart became more and more intense, even making his forehead covered with sweat and breathing more and more difficult. He could only hold back his anger and wait for reinforcements to come. The woman in white smiled lightly and said softly, Fenglay Pavilion, such a familiar sect name, it seems that I have heard of it before. The woman in white fell into deep thought. After a while, the woman in white seemed to remember something and said in surprise, it turned out to be Fenglay Pavilion. I remember that tens of thousands of years ago, Fenglay Pavilion was just a small force, and later it became a super section. The face of the Fenglay Pavilion disciple suddenly turned pale. Since you know that Fenglay Pavilion is a super sect, you still dare to bully us like this? The Fenglay Pavilion disciple shouted angrily, feeling so frustrated that he vomited blood. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 363. It's just a superpower. The woman in white snorted coldly, her beautiful eyes flashing with contempt, obviously disdainful. The arrogant tone and attitude of the woman in white made the disciples of Fenglay Pavilion very angry, but they had nowhere to vent, and they were so frustrated that they were about to explode. Why haven't the elders arrived yet? Fen Lingyun was anxious and more afraid, with veins on his forehead throbbing, and he couldn't help but urge. No. I don't know. The disciple of Fenglay Pavilion lowered his head, sweat dripping on his forehead, and said carefully. Waste, Fen Lingyun cursed. In the blink of an eye, several breaths passed, and there was still no reinforcement. Fen Lingyun's heart gradually sank, and a fear surged in his heart. No matter what, let's escape first, and wait for the elders to come, and let the elders deal with her, Fen Lingyun thought secretly. Then he connected the dragon beast chariot not far away with his mind. The next moment, the dragon beast chariot suddenly burst into dazzling golden light, then opened the curtain, let out a roar that shook the earth and sky, and rushed straight into the sky. Ang! A huge five-clawed dragon with a body of 100 meters long flew out, exuding a monstrous divine power, stirring up the wind and clouds, and the deafening dragon roar resounded through the world, like an ancient prehistoric monster descending. Dragon Beast Chariot. Many Fenglay Pavilion cultivators saw this and exclaimed excitedly, with joy on their faces. Especially Fen Lingyun, he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, and the worries on his face disappeared, replaced by excitement, as if he had met a savior. Fortunately, the Dragon Beast Chariot can still be started. The Dragon Beast Chariot broke through the void, and the speed was so fast that it appeared beside Fen Lingyun as if it was teleported. Quick, let's leave. Fen Lingyun shouted to the disciples of Fenglay Pavilion, and hurriedly entered the Dragon Beast Chariot with Fairy Yueshan. Yeah, the Fenglay Pavilion disciple nodded quickly, followed Fen Lingyun into the Dragon Beast Chariot, and drove the Dragon Beast Chariot away quickly. Huh? Run away now, the white-clothed woman muttered in surprise, with a charming arc at the corner of her mouth. But I want to see where you can run to, the white-clothed woman snorted coldly, waved her jade hand, and the majestic soul power rolled out wildly, instantly covering the area of 10,000 feet in radius. In an instant, the scene of the area of 10,000 feet in radius was all presented in the eyes of the white-clothed woman. The dragon beast chariot that Fen Lingyun was sitting on and the Fenglay Pavilion disciples he brought with him were all clearly grasped by the white-clothed woman. It's just a broken car, but you really treat it as a treasure. The white-clothed woman raised her fingertips lightly, and a bright sword light tore through the sky, and in the blink of an eye it fell on the dragon beast chariot. With a bang, the dragon beast chariot shook violently. Fen Lingyun immediately urged the dragon beast chariot to speed up and rush into the sky. You are just a trick, and you still want to escape from my palm, the woman in white snorted coldly, and her slender white jade hand slashed through the air again, and the dazzling light flashed. Bang! The Fenglay Pavilion chariot was attacked one after another, shaking and vibrating, and there was a trace of blood seeping out. Damn it, the face of the Fenglay Pavilion disciple turned pale. Fen Lingyuan forcibly suppressed the panic in his heart, tried his best to control the dragon beast chariot, and frantically urged the spiritual energy in his body. But it still didn't help. He couldn't get rid of the restraints of the woman in white at all. The woman in white played with them with just one jade hand, and they were simply vulnerable. Their strength was too different from that of the woman in white. It was completely the difference between the light of a firefly and the light of the bright moon. This is like a mortal facing an immortal, with no resistance at all. This is an absolute strength crushing. The terrifying strength of the woman in white shocked Fen Lingyuan. If he had been promoted to the saint realm, he might have been able to deal with it, but unfortunately he was far from that. Young master, if this continues, we will be exhausted to death, the Fenglay Pavilion disciple hurriedly reminded. Shut up, Fen Lingyuan gritted his teeth. At this time, his fists were clenched tightly, and his face was extremely distorted and almost deformed. It can be seen how angry he was at this time. Fen Lingyuan gritted his teeth and said, "Keep on going. Can't stop. We must get rid of her. Otherwise, the consequences will be disastrous." Swish, swish, swish. The Fenglay Pavilion chariot turned into a series of purple electric lights and shuttled between the clouds. The speed soared to the fastest, like lightning, thousands of feet in a breath, and disappeared from the sight of the white-clothed woman like lightning. Every time the Fenglay Pavilion chariot shuttled, it would leave a residual image. Fen Lingyuan and Fairy Yueshan were sitting in the dragon beast chariot, their hearts hanging in the air, their faces full of anxiety and tension, fearing that the elders of Fenglay Pavilion would not catch up, or that the woman in white would catch up. Still want to escape? Seeing this scene, the woman in white sneered teasingly, "Don't overestimate your own abilities." As soon as the voice fell, a destructive and terrifying murderous aura swept out from the white-clothed woman's body, covering the entire world, and the cold and ruthless murderous intent filled the world. Puff. The disciples of Fenglay Pavilion who were driving the dragon beast chariot could not bear this terrifying murderous aura, and they spat out a large mouthful of blood in fear, and their faces turned pale as paper. The dragon beast chariot trembled violently and almost fell down. Fortunately, it was stabilized by the control of Fen Lingyuan and Fairy Yueshan. "Stop for me," the woman in white shouted coldly, and she struck out with one palm. The terrifying power condensed into a bright blue sword light, which slashed down with destructive power. Wherever it passed, the clouds collapsed. This palm contains terrifying power, enough to destroy mountains and uproot peaks. Not good. Sensing the chilling and dangerous aura coming from behind, the Fenglay Pavilion disciple's face suddenly changed, his hair stood up, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Young master, are we going to die?" the Fenglay Pavilion disciple asked in horror, his eyes full of fear. The defense of the dragon beast chariot is terrifying, but the strength of the woman in white is too terrifying. Don't talk. Concentrate on controlling the dragon beast chariot. Fen Lingyuan gritted his teeth and growled, his face full of anxiety. Fen Lingyuan was angry and furious in his heart, but he had no way to get rid of the woman in white. The strength displayed by the woman in white was so strong that it was suffocating. The Fenglay Pavilion disciple was so scared that he trembled all over, dared not say anything, and controlled the dragon beast chariot with all his strength. The speed of the dragon beast chariot reached the extreme, like a lightning gallop, so fast that it was difficult to capture with the naked eye. However, the terrifying palm of the woman in white was so powerful that wherever it passed, the space shattered into pieces. Its power was extremely fierce. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 364. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the blue sword light suddenly hit the dragon beast chariot, and there was a deafening explosion. The dazzling blue light bloomed, breathtaking, like a fireworks feast, lighting up the dim sky. Wind and thunder shield, Fen Lingyuan roared. Pieces of boulders flew out suddenly, forming a hard defensive formation around the dragon beast chariot. At the same time, the wind and thunder tower released a bright and dazzling blue light. Bang bang bang. The sword light shattered the solid shield like a broken bamboo. Fen Lingyuan was shocked, and his face showed unprecedented panic. The defense of the dragon beast chariot was like paper under this blow. Crack. Puff. The sword light swept across, and the Fenglay Pavilion chariot was torn apart on the spot. Fen Lingyuan and Fairy Yueshan vomited blood at the same time. The dragon beast chariot was instantly scrapped, and Fairy Fen Lingyuan and Yueshan fell down and were seriously injured. At this moment, Fen Lingyuan felt a sharp pain in his head, and then his eyes darkened, he could not see anything, and his body fell weakly. Young Master! Brother Yun! Seeing this scene, the disciples of Fenglay Pavilion and Fairy Yueshan cried out in grief. You don't listen to my good advice, the woman in white said coldly, then I can only send these people to the west. As soon as she finished speaking, the woman in white slowly stretched out her jade hand and pressed it against the Fenglay Pavilion disciple. In an instant, a huge palm of energy condensed and suppressed it with the terrifying power of destroying the world. It blocked the sun and covered hundreds of miles in radius. The void rolled violently, as if the end of the era was coming. No. Help. Go. Leave quickly. Young Master, save me. The disciples of Fenglay Pavilion looked extremely frightened, struggling and screaming desperately. The terrifying power was so frightening that their livers and gallbladders were split apart, and they were left with no master. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the giant palm struck the disciples of Fenglay Pavilion, and the earth-shattering explosion completely detonated, shaking all directions. An unparalleled terrifying shockwave raged, destroying the world and destroying the earth, and the clouds within hundreds of miles exploded. In an instant, this apocalypse territory army was swallowed up. Everyone in Fenglay Pavilion, including other Apocalypse Domain sect disciples who followed, were all reduced to ashes, with no bones left, not even the dregs left. The aftermath of the terror spread crazily, destroying everything in its path. Everything in its path was annihilated, the void completely collapsed and shattered, the earth trembled, and endless dust spread, obscuring the vision. Everyone, all died. Fairy Yueshan looked at the scene in disbelief, with grief on her face and her beautiful eyes moistening. You are so cruel, you actually killed them all, Fairy Yueshan said sadly, her beautiful eyes staring fiercely at the woman in white high in the sky. The disciples of Fenglay Pavilion are the top elites of Fenglay Pavilion. The loss of any one of them makes Fairy Yueshan feel heartbroken. More importantly, these people all died for her, how could Fairy Yueshan not hate them? However, this energy wave seemed to intentionally avoid her and did not cause any harm to her. Moreover, because she and Fen Lingyuan stood together, Fen Lingyuan also survived. This made Fairy Yueshan feel a little better. I personally help you get rid of the shackles of the past and welcome a new life. You should thank me. The woman in white said indifferently, her light voice sounding like a magic spell. Immediately she waved her hand, and two transparent cages appeared out of thin air, and the seriously injured Fen Lingyuan and Fairy Yueshan were imprisoned and entered respectively. Brother Yun, how are you? Fairy Yueshan clenched her fists with both hands and kept beating the transparent cage around her, her pretty face pale and colorless. Fen Lingyuan had regained some consciousness, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, shook his head and said, "It's okay, I will recover after a period of rest." Then he looked at the woman in white, clenched his fists, and roared, "What on earth do you want to do?" "Nothing," the woman in white shrugged and said, "I just wanted to prepare a gift." "So you want to capture my fiancé as your so-called gift?" Fen Lingyuan became more and more excited as he spoke. "Fiancé," the woman in white raised her lips slightly, outlining a charming smile, and said, "It seems that your relationship is unusual. It turns out that there is an engagement, so that would be even better. I heard that Qin Mu likes this." Fen Lingyun's eyes were scarlet and he roared, "Let her go. Let her go immediately. Otherwise I will never spare you. Do you think you are worthy? Who do you think you are? What are you threatening me with?" the woman in white asked jokingly. Fen Lingyun gritted his teeth and said angrily, struggling hard with his hands and feet, but to no avail. Below, a large number of people and cultivators raised their heads and looked into the void. Their eyes were attracted by the woman in white, and there was an uproar. "Who is that fairy? Her strength is so terrifying, so many people in Fenglay Pavilion were killed by her in one move even if they joined forces to resist." The young master of Fenglay Pavilion was powerless to fight back. "How terrifying! I have never seen such a terrifying woman. Who is she? Maybe she is His Majesty's concubine. I don't see how your Majesty's concubine can be so powerful. She must be some hidden powerhouse. You don't understand this. Who is our Majesty? That's right, I think this fairy must admire our Majesty." The streets in Chang'an City were full of discussions. The people were very excited and lively, and even some elderly people knelt down and saluted. The woman in white hadn't thought that she had already been identified by the people of Chang'an City just by showing up. At this time, Fairy Yueshan finally reacted from her sadness, stared at the woman in white with her beautiful eyes, and shouted angrily, "Let Brother Yun go. Let him go." The woman in white frowned slightly, then smiled and said, "I won't." After the words fell, the woman in white flicked her finger lightly. Puff. Fen Lingyun spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face became even paler. "Brother Yun." Fairy Yueshan cried with tears on her face, "Brother Yun, I'm sorry, it's all my fault that I got you into trouble." She was full of self-blame and regret. Fen Lingyun was about to say something to comfort him, and suddenly saw several familiar figures flying out of Chang'an City in his peripheral vision. "It's the elders. It's the elders. Chan'er, we are saved," Fen Lingyun said ecstatically, almost jumping up with excitement. The elders finally arrived. Fen Lingyun secretly breathed a sigh of relief, finally getting rid of the woman in white. "Elder," Fairy Yueshan also saw those familiar figures, her beautiful eyes flashing with hope. However, the next second, the smiles of Fen Lingyun and Fairy Yueshan froze instantly. They were stunned on the spot, and trembled violently, as if they had seen the most incredible scene in the world. "At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 365. After the elders flew out of Chang'an City, they stood respectfully on both sides, ignoring their pleading eyes, as if they had not seen them at all. Seeing this scene, Fen Lingyun was stunned, his head was buzzing, his heart was twitching violently, he almost fainted, and a strong look of despair appeared on his face. The elders actually abandoned them? Why on earth? Didn't the elders come to rescue them? "Elder, I'm here. Come and save me, I'm Lingyun, come on." Fen Lingyun shouted anxiously, but unfortunately no one paid attention to him, not even a fart. Not only that, but the saint elders from other sects and holy places also filed out and stood there respectfully with their heads bowed. Even the saint who he had always remembered as unruly, arrogant stood like a grandson at this time. Fairy Yueshan's pretty face also condensed slightly, and her beautiful eyes swept over the elders, and found that they looked at her with disgust and coldness. It was as if they were looking at a stranger, and there was no appreciation and kindness in their eyes. What's wrong with the elders? Why do they have such expressions? Don't they know Brother Yun? Or are they deliberately ignoring him? Fairy Yueshan was full of doubts and confusion. Fen Lingyun was also confused, and he couldn't understand what was going on. "Elders, don't you remember me?" Fen Lingyuan couldn't help but shout again. This time someone finally responded to him. A Fenglay Pavilion Saint Elder looked at Fen Lingyuan and shouted angrily with an expressionless face, "Bold thief, you actually broke into Chang'an City. You simply disregarded the laws of the Qin dynasty and ignored the righteous path. You are guilty of heinous crimes and deserve to die. Today I will enforce justice for the heavens and eliminate evil villains like you." As soon as these words came out, Fen Lingyuan was stunned. The elders of his own family actually called him a thief. Still want to kill him for the sake of justice? Fen Lingyuan was completely dumbfounded, and the whole person was petrified. Could it be that the elders were deliberately teasing him? But this joke was not funny at all. "What nonsense are you talking about? I am Lingyuan, the young master of Fenglay Pavilion," Fen Lingyuan roared angrily. He couldn't believe what he heard. The Saint Elder said coldly, "Humph. Even if you are the son of heaven, so what? Violating the taboo must be punished with death." The other elders responded one after another, all with a cold look, as if they had a deep hatred for Fen Lingyuan. Fen Lingyuan took a deep breath and said gloomily, "Elders, are you controlled? Asshole. Obviously committed a huge mistake, but still spread rumors here to confuse the public, violated the precepts of the Qin dynasty, and committed a heinous crime. Must be severely punished." The Saint Elder scolded loudly, with a look of righteous indignation, as if he really wanted to kill Fen Lingyuan for the sake of justice. "Are you really crazy? I am really Fen Lingyuan," Fen Lingyuan yelled in exasperation. However, the Saint Elders showed no mercy or sympathy, and even showed a touch of cruelty. At this moment, Fen Lingyuan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. His whole body twitched violently, his face was hideously distorted, and he was extremely frightened. What on earth is going on? He is obviously the young master of Fenglay Pavilion. Why don't they recognize him? Pa pa pa. The woman in white looked at the scene and couldn't help but applaud, with a mocking arc at the corner of her mouth, and said contemptuously, "Wonderful. It's really wonderful." She clapped her hands while laughing, and her charming smile looked particularly charming, but her voice was full of teasing and sarcasm. "You don't agree to say you are a waste. Look, as a young master, you can make your own elders forget you completely, haha. It's so funny." At the end, the woman in white laughed so hard that she shook her body and fell backwards, completely losing her image. When this news reached Chang'an City, the people and monks of Chang'an City could not help but smile mockingly, and the whole city was filled with cheerful laughter. "So his name is Fen Lingyuan, how shameful. I have heard of this Fenglay Pavilion, which is a first-class force in the Tiankai domain, but I never thought that their young master would be so stupid. What so-called young master, in Chang'an City, at the feet of His Majesty, you have to coil up if you are a dragon, and you have to lie down if you are a tiger. Not to mention people like him. Haha, the dignified young master of Fenglay Pavilion, but his own elders turned around to help our great Qin. What a dramatic scene. If I were him, I would have found a piece of tofu and hit myself to death now. It's too shameful, and I have no face to live at all." For a while, there was a lot of discussion on the street, and laughter, ridicule, and gloating were heard one after another. Hearing these words, Fen Lingyuan felt so ashamed that he wanted to find a crack to crawl into. He felt that his dignity was humiliated and his heart was about to explode. Fen Lingyuan clenched his fists, gnashed his teeth, and felt no pain when his nails pierced into his flesh. His heart was filled with resentment and hatred, and his eyes were bloodshot, like a beast that was choosing its prey. He came out of seclusion, full of confidence, and wanted to make a name for himself in this world and become a true child of destiny that everyone admired. But who knew that he hadn't really pretended to be like this before he encountered such a thing? The young master of Fenglay Pavilion was ignored as heir in front of his own elders, and was even judged. It was really a disgrace. Fen Lingyuan felt a strong sense of shame, his heart was burning with anger, and his blood was boiling. At this moment, Fen Lingyun felt that the whole world had changed. He wanted to tell himself that all this was fake, and the saint elders in front of him were all illusory and were deceiving him, but reason told him that all this had really happened. Because Fen Lingyun could clearly feel the pressure and strong murderous intent that each saint elder had on him. Especially the saint elder just now, who had the strongest murderous intent. It seemed that with just one order, this saint elder would immediately choose to kill him. This made Fen Lingyun horrified and confused. What happened to them? Was it because they were possessed? Why did it become like this? I don't accept it. Fen Lingyun was furious and roared continuously. The deafening roar shocked the entire Chang'an city. He felt that all this was like a nightmare. Fen Lingyun was unwilling to admit that he was a waste, and he was even more unwilling to bear the shame of being betrayed and abandoned. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 366. I, Fen Lingyun, am the young master of Fenglay Pavilion. I have outstanding talents. I am destined to ascend to the immortal realm and become a true immortal in the future. Why do you call me a waste? Fen Lingyun asked angrily. Fairy Yueshan looked at the wildly roaring Fen Lingyun with a distressed expression, her eyes confused and at a loss. How could this happen? Fairy Yueshan murmured in a low voice, her delicate body trembling uncontrollably, and she slowly knelt down in the void cage, tears streaming from her eyes. What should we do? Elders and others seem to have changed. What should we do? Brother Yun. She had never encountered such a weird and desperate thing before, and for a moment she felt like the whole world had collapsed. Fairy Yueshan was filled with regret. If she had known that things would turn out like this, she would never have come to Great Qin and would have stayed far away. She simply couldn't imagine what would happen to her if she was captured by the woman in white today and used as a gift to the lecherous and foolish King Qin Mu. When she thought of this, Fairy Yueshan felt cold all over her body, her pretty face turned pale, her delicate body trembled, tears fell down her face, and her beautiful eyes were full of despair and desolation. Fen Lingyun looked at the crying Fairy Yueshan. The anxiety and suppressed anger in his heart could no longer be endured, and he shouted. That's enough. Stop crying. I only know how to cry all day long. What's the use of crying? Hearing this, Fairy Yueshan was so frightened that she immediately stopped crying and looked at Fen Lingyun with her beautiful eyes in shock. She had never seen such a ferocious Fen Lingyun. Fen Lingyun's expression was very ferocious, as terrifying as Shura from hell. Yun. Fairy Yueshan opened her little cherry mouth with an aggrieved look on her face. She wanted to explain something but couldn't, and her eyes were red. That's enough. Stop talking, Fen Lingyun roared. Fairy Yueshan immediately covered her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes, and stared at Fen Lingyun with a fearful expression. A deep disappointment flashed in her hazy eyes. However, Fen Lingyun, who was already crazy at this time, obviously would not pay attention to these details as usual. His facial muscles were violently twitching, his fists were clenched, and he looked at the woman in white with gritted teeth and said, what on earth is going on? What despicable tricks did you use to seduce these elders? He knew that he was probably doomed today, and before he died, he only wanted to know one answer. Of course, he didn't want to die, so he had to get more information to analyze his situation. Although Fen Lingyun was furious at this moment, he had not completely lost his mind. He could clearly sense that there was something fishy about it, and it must have something to do with the woman in white. The woman in white smiled indifferently, shook her head and said, "Trash is trash. You can never see through anything. You are really stupid. I don't have such a big hand to control so many saints. There is obviously someone else behind this. The woman in white smiled slightly and said, as for who he is. The woman in white gathered her thoughts, moved her gaze to the distant sky, and said with a smile, since you are already here, why not show up and see me? As the voice of the woman in white resounded throughout Chang'an city, countless monks immediately raised their heads and looked into the void. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, an extremely bright golden light shot out of the sky and descended in front of everyone with a vast and surging aura. Boom! A majestic power suddenly swept across the world, suppressing all directions and making thousands of monks' souls tremble. Hiss! In an instant, countless monks took a deep breath, stunned by the sudden sight before them. In their sight, 9 5-clawed golden dragons pulled a huge dragon standing in the air, exuding dazzling golden light, filled with overwhelming and domineering momentum, looking down on the world. It's like a bright sun stretching across the sky, illuminating the entire city of Chang'an. In addition to the golden light, there is also a terrifying imperial power, as if a peerless god king has descended, which makes people feel palpitated. Quasi-emperor's aura. And there are 9 of them. The woman in white's eyes became serious, and a trace of solemnity appeared on her cheeks. This kind of momentum is definitely not possessed by ordinary quasi-emperors. Even at the peak of quasi-emperor, compared with the terrifying momentum in front of him, it is far behind. These 9 momentums are too terrifying and vast, they are simply destructive and terrifying. He is really the quasi-emperor. The woman in white frowned slightly and looked at the golden dragon with a solemn expression. In her memory, she had never heard of 9 powerful quasi-emperors from the dragon clan in the mainland. But these 9 golden dragons truly possess the power fluctuations of a quasi-emperor, and the 9 golden dragons have different shapes, lifelike, and vivid, as if they are living mythical beasts. As a white tiger, she is most sensitive to the scent of divine beasts, so she is sure that these 9 golden dragons are not illusions, but genuine quasi-emperor level divine beasts. How is this possible? She had never heard of 9 quasi-emperors, let alone seen such a terrifying quasi-emperor who was just one of them pulling a cart. This is too crazy. How astonishing must be the existence sitting in the dragon's trap. The woman in white didn't even dare to continue thinking about it, because this was simply unbelievable. The appearance of the Kowloon Lahu made her finally understand why she felt a sense of extreme danger. Each of these 9 terrifying beings is enough to crush her. The woman in white looked closely, wanting to see who was sitting in the dragon chariot, whether it was as she guessed. And the next moment, "White Tiger, what is your intention in coming to my great Qin this time?" A low and majestic voice came from the 9-dragon divine chariot, like the will of an ancient god, which was awe-inspiring. The white-clothed woman's face changed instantly, her pupils suddenly shrank into needle-like shapes, her heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she looked at the 9-dragon divine chariot in surprise. I was recognized. The white-clothed woman was shocked. Not only the white-clothed woman, but all the onlookers in Chang'an city were shocked. No one expected that this seemingly weak and boneless woman in white would be from the White Tiger clan. I didn't expect that she was actually a strong person from the White Tiger clan. No wonder there was such a strong fluctuation of breath. As expected of the White Tiger clan, one of the 4 sacred beasts, it's really terrifying. A strong person from the White Tiger clan actually came to our great Qin. No wonder the skills she just displayed were so strange, it turned out to be the skills of the White Tiger clan. Now there will be a good show to watch. Everyone was talking about it, looking at the void with expectation. After all, this is the great Qin. With His Majesty here, no matter how powerful the White Tiger clan is, they will definitely not be able to make any waves. The woman in white took a deep breath, suppressed the shock in her heart, and said respectfully, "The Junior is the Holy Lord of the White Tiger clan, and I am here to seek the protection of the great Qin royal family under the order of my king." At this moment, she has begun to regard herself as a junior, and expressed her thoughts directly. Feng Lingyun, who was watching this scene, was even more dumbfounded. He originally thought that this woman in white was the mastermind behind the scenes, but he didn't expect that there was someone else. Fairy Yueshan was also stunned, looking at the 9-dragon sedan in the air with surprise. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shock, and her mind was in a mess. At this time, a young man in a black robe slowly walked out of the dragon chariot and walked in the air. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 367. He was wearing a black dragon robe, his long black hair fluttering, his angular handsome face was covered with a hint of coldness, and his whole body revealed a self-centered temperament. The moment the black-robed young man appeared, the temperature around him dropped suddenly, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth seemed to be attracted and summoned by something, and gathered towards him frantically, turning into a group of white mists. After a short pause, the thick white mists quickly spun, gradually forming one white lotus after another, wrapping the black-robed young man inside, making him look like a banished immortal. Extraordinary. His every move showed the power of the emperor. It was the great Qin emperor, Qin Mu. He stood in the void, overlooking Chang'an city, his dark eyes flashed with cold light, making people dare not look directly at him, and vaguely felt a chilling murderous intent. "Welcome, Your Majesty." "Greetings, Your Majesty." When Qin Mu appeared, the crowd was so excited that they knelt down and shouted in unison. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Greetings, Your Majesty." Then, in the streets and alleys of Chang'an city, countless people shouted in unison. Merchants, guards, and servants all knelt down. The sound was like thunder, awakening the entire great Qin imperial city. The people of Chang'an city knelt on the ground, their faces filled with excitement and respect. During this period of time, the situation in the Great Qin was precarious, and wars frequently occurred in various places, and the people were living in poverty. But fortunately, the strong suppression of Your Majesty stabilized the situation and saved the people from disaster. When Qin Mu showed his true strength and once again strongly suppressed nearly 100 saints and saved Chang'an city from fire and water, no one said that what he had done before was a foolish act. Instead, they scolded themselves for not understanding the Holy Heart, being of low realm, and misunderstanding His Majesty. At this moment, Qin Mu was the invincible emperor in their hearts. He was the only existence of faith in the Great Qin dynasty and the spiritual pillar of the people of the Great Qin dynasty. "Stand up." Qin Mu stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes swept calmly towards the people who knelt down, and slowly spoke. His tone was gentle but full of supreme majesty. Hearing this, the people just stood up tremblingly, looking at Qin Mu with great respect. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Your Majesty's divine power is as vast as the sea, and it is rare in the ages. We are willing to follow Your Majesty and swear allegiance to you until death." The monks and people in Chang'an city shouted in unison, each of them was full of piety and fanaticism on their faces, looking at Qin Mu with burning eyes, and the depths of their eyes were filled with reverence, excitement, and admiration, which were extremely fiery. In their hearts, Qin Mu was already regarded as a god, and could not be surpassed. Especially the people in Chang'an city, who had witnessed the legendary scenes with their own eyes, had already had a nearly blind devotion and trust in Qin Mu. What tyrant! This is a complete distortion of the facts and a slander against their majesty. As long as their majesty is still alive, the Great Qin dynasty will always prosper and the country will be peaceful and the people will be safe. Your Majesty is the first wise king of the Great Qin dynasty. Listening to the praises from all around, Qin Mu was not only not happy, but also had a headache. Now that these people admire him so much, how can he do stupid things in the future? He has never been a wise king, he just wants to be a tyrant. The reason why he turned the tide at the last moment this time was because he didn't want his great Qin to be damaged. After all, the great Qin is his foundation. How can he watch the great Qin be destroyed? So he can only do a big thing every once in a while, like cutting leeks, and harvest a wave of titles of tyrants in a way that is incompetent and makes everyone desperate. Then at the last moment, he saved the Qin dynasty and preserved its foundation. After all, if the country was gone, then he, the ruler of the Qin dynasty, would only exist in name. But it seemed that he had gone too far this time, and the people of the Qin dynasty worshipped him. Now, in their hearts, he has become an omnipotent god who can save the Qin dynasty. Qin Mu felt a little annoyed. Judging from the current situation, I am afraid that if he makes foolish moves in the future, no one will oppose him, or even scold him. Maybe they will cooperate with him and brag about him as powerful as a god. Alas! Qin Mu sighed in his heart. It seems that the future system tasks cannot be done as perfectly as before. However, Qin Mu soon let it go. With his current strength, he is no longer afraid of any enemy, and it is only a matter of time before he unifies the 9 regions of the human race. To put it more exaggeratedly, the whole world has a total of 42 regions, and he can also slowly plan to let the Qin cavalry sweep across the 8 wastelands and 6 directions and conquer all the regions. Let the flag of the Great Qin fly over every territory, and people will change color when talking about Qin. Thinking of this, Qin Mu raised a smile. This is the true road to becoming an emperor. At this time, those saint elders of the Apocalypse domain were still kneeling on the ground, even though Qin Mu had said to stand up, and even though the people of the Great Qin had stood up. But as saints, they still knelt on the ground and did not stand up, but instead looked terrified and nervous. This posture was as if they, the saints, were even lower than the common people, the lowest slaves, without any status, and without the slightest saintly dignity. Although this was the case, not long ago they were still kneeling on the city wall to apologize to the people of Chang'an City. From that moment on, their former status, dignity, and everything they had in the past all vanished and turned into nothing. From now on, they no longer have the identity of saints, but only the identity of Qin's war slaves. And their original pride and self-esteem were shattered, and they were trampled into the quagmire, and they would never be able to turn over. Your Majesty, you are back. A white-bearded old man said cautiously, with sweat on his forehead, and he looked extremely frightened. The other saints also had a trembling expression, and their eyes were full of fear and horror when they looked at Qin Mu. Qin Mu glanced at them, his eyes narrowed, revealing a dangerous light. I left for a while, and Chang'an City was attacked by your monks from the Tiankai domain. Your Majesty, please forgive me, Your Majesty, please forgive me. The white-bearded old man was so scared that he trembled all over, and he kowtowed and begged for mercy, kowtowed continuously, and his head hit the cold and hard floor, making a loud bang. Although Qin Mu had told them not to take action for the time being, he did not dare to refute when Qin Mu blamed them. He could only kowtow desperately to admit his mistakes. Your Majesty, calm down. This matter is our fault. We are useless and unable to resist the foreign enemy. Please punish us. The other saints were also terrified. They knelt on the ground one after another and dared not say much. Qin Mu glanced at them lightly. He did not let these saints come out to meet the enemy at the first time because he wanted to see where the woman in white stood. It was considered to be giving her a chance. If the woman in white was biased towards the Apocalypse domain, or even helped the Apocalypse domain to attack Dakin, then Qin Mu would definitely take decisive action to eliminate her. But it was obvious that the woman in white chose Dakin and made a very wise choice. Since she gave up fighting Dakin with the Apocalypse domain, Qin Mu did not mind talking to her. However, the cultivators of the Apocalypse domain actually killed into Chang'an City and were ready to demolish his fairy palace. This matter was not so easy to solve. Your Majesty. We are aware of our crimes and beg your majesty to punish us." Seeing Qin Mu remain silent, several saint elders turned pale and continued to kowtow and admit their mistakes. This scene fell into the eyes of Fairy Yueshan and Feng Lingyun, which shocked the two of them and made them feel unbelievable. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 368. This is a saint who is high and mighty. He actually kowtowed in front of this young man, like a slave. Moreover, they seemed to be extremely afraid of this young man, as if they were afraid of angering him. Is this world crazy? And more importantly, this young man turned out to be Qin Mu, the lord of the great Qin? Fairy Yueshan and Feng Lingyun were shocked. They had never thought that the saint of the apocalypse domain would be so humble and respectful in front of the lord of the great Qin. What happened in the middle? Feng Lingyun was shocked and confused at this time. He couldn't figure out why things turned out like this. But no matter what, the identity of this young man is beyond doubt. He is the lord of the great Qin. Feng Lingyun was filled with strong jealousy. Why? Why can he be so revered by these high and mighty saints? He refused to accept it. Looking at Qin Mu, who seemed to be the only one in the world, Feng Lingyun was about to explode with envy. Especially when comparing his current situation, it is no exaggeration to say that one is like a god hanging high in the sky, and the other is like humble dust. There is no comparison at all. How is it possible? Fairy Yueshan's delicate body was stiff in place, staring at the majestic figure in a daze, muttering to herself. The shock in her heart was hard to suppress, and a complex luster flashed in her beautiful eyes. She never thought that the lord of the great Qin was so handsome, which was completely opposite to the image of a fierce man with a strong back and waist in her impression. This was a young man who was not very old, wearing a purple and gold dragon robe, with a jade-like face, handsome, and surrounded by infinite power. He just stood there quietly, as dazzling as a brilliant sun, making people feel ashamed and dare not compete with him. He seemed to control the life and death of all living things, crushing the sky and dimming the stars, making people want to prostrate themselves at his feet and worship him. His eyes seemed to contain the secrets of the stars and the universe, deep and far-reaching. Just a glance, Fairy Yueshan felt a sense of shock in her heart, and couldn't help but lower her head, not daring to look directly into those eyes. Fairy Yueshan took a deep breath, tried to suppress the shock in her heart, barely raised her head, and stared at the Lord of Dakin. Looking at Qin Mu with an indifferent face, she suddenly thought that from the initial immortal cave to the current Tiankai domain's one domain attack on Dakin, there seemed to be an invisible big hand behind it. Perhaps all this was because of the young man in front of her, which led to the sudden outbreak of the war between Dakin and Tiankai domain. Thinking of this, Fairy Yueshan was instantly horrified. A chill spread across her spine. If this catastrophe was really caused by this young man, it would be too terrible. Who is this young man? How could there be such a terrible method? Is it the reincarnation of a certain emperor? What exactly does he want to do? Questions flashed through her mind, and Fairy Yueshan's heart trembled. Even she herself was a little skeptical of her own guess. After all, this guess was really sensational and absurd. But how to explain this? For a moment, Fairy Yueshan's mind was turning over and over. At this time, under the attention of everyone, Qin Mu slowly walked towards the saints. He walked towards the crowd step by step, and every step he took would cause the ground to shake slightly, as if it was weighed by 1,000 kilograms. Qin Mu's eyes fell on the group of saints who were kneeling on the ground and trembling, and he slowly said, "Since you know your dereliction of duty, I am too lazy to care. As long as you don't make the same mistake in the future, I can let you go." Hearing Qin Mu's words, the saints breathed a sigh of relief. However, before he could let out a sigh of relief, he heard Qin Mu say again, You can escape the death penalty, but you can't escape the living punishment. Although the order not to take action was issued by Qin Mu, so what? He could punish these people however he wanted, without any reason. As he spoke, Qin Mu pointed out, and the bodies of the saints suddenly shook violently. One after another, dark chains penetrated their bodies, tied them up, and sealed all their cultivation. No, the saints screamed in fear. Your Majesty, how can you be so cruel? Spare my life, Your Majesty, please show mercy. We are willing to go through fire and water for Your Majesty. The saints were so scared that their souls flew away, and they kowtowed and begged for mercy, trembling all over. This kind of pain of having their cultivation sealed was simply unbearable, and it was more terrible than death for them. However, Qin Mu was not moved at all. He looked at the saints with cold eyes and said indifferently, "Since you know your mistakes, you should pay the price." The voice fell. Boom! Accompanied by the deafening sound of thunder. A dazzling golden lightning flashed through the void and struck the saints fiercely. In an instant, screams rang out. No! My body! Your Majesty, spare my life! The shrill screams spread all around, making people shudder. I saw that the saints were entangled by thunder, their bodies were charred, their skin was cracked, and their white bones were exposed. They fell to the ground wailing, their bodies twitched violently, and their clothes were stained red with blood. The shrill screams resounded through the heavens and earth, reaching everyone's ears, making people shudder. At this moment, the entire Chang'an city was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes widened, their faces full of shock. This kind of scene of a saint being punished is rare, or even impossible to see. They have learned something new today. It turns out that when a saint is punished, he will feel pain, scream, wail, and beg for mercy just like ordinary people like them. Your Majesty, please let us go. I know I was wrong. Please give me a way out. I am willing to go through fire and water for Your Majesty. Please give us a way out, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please spare us. Many saints were still screaming, wailing, and begging, hoping that Qin Mu would let them go. Fen Lingyuan looked at his elders being beaten to pieces and dying, and was so scared that he dared not speak. A saint, high above, looking down on all living beings, was actually beaten and scolded by Qin Mu like an animal with a whip, wailing miserably. How terrifying is he? This is simply a devil. After a while, Qin Mu stopped whipping and said indifferently, I will let you go today. If you commit the same offense again in the future, you will be severely punished. Hearing this, all the saints trembled. Follow the order of Your Majesty, the group of saints saluted respectfully. Qin Mu waved his hand and said, Get lost. After saying that, the saints were relieved immediately, as if they had been pardoned, and really left here in a rolling way. After dealing with these things, Qin Mu looked at the woman in white and smiled and said, What do you want to see me for? I have been a little mercury reversed these days. First, my tonsils were inflamed and my throat became festering. I haven't recovered after 3 days of water yesterday. My grandma fell again and broke her arm. I have to take her to the hospital for an X-ray tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 369. The woman in white had been watching quietly, her expression seemingly calm, but in fact her heart was turbulent. The shock in her heart was not much less than that of Fen Lingyuan. Even because her knowledge was higher than that of Fen Lingyuan, her feelings were deeper. She didn't expect that the man in front of her would be so powerful. The other party was so powerful that she could remember him for a lifetime even if it was just a brief encounter. Especially the power Qin Mu showed when he punished those saints just now. Although it was not imposed on her, she could feel that Qin Mu's realm was far beyond her reach. How did he practice? The woman in white is extremely happy now. The decision she made on the spur of the moment was really wise. If not, she might just have to escape in a hurry now. But even so, the woman in white was still a little uneasy in her heart at this time, feeling like a sheep entering a tiger's mouth, fearing that Qin Mu would suddenly go berserk and attack her indiscriminately. After all, cooperation is based on equal strength between the two parties. If one party is too strong, then cooperation will be another matter. The woman in white's mind moved slightly, and the altar hidden somewhere trembled. She felt slightly relieved in her heart. With this altar here, even if Qin Mu suddenly attacks her, she will be sure to leave here. The woman in white gently stroked her hair at the temples and smiled softly. Your Majesty has a keen eye, I am indeed from the White Tiger clan. Hearing the other party's admission, Qin Mu smiled slightly. He was not surprised. Instead, he looked at it with strange eyes. Chi stayed at one place for a while and asked again. So you are really the White Tiger? Seeing that the other party hesitated for a moment before speaking, the woman in white couldn't help but be stunned. What does this mean? Didn't you already admit it? Why ask again? Doesn't the other party trust me? Or is the other party biased against the White Tiger clan? Many thoughts flashed through the woman in white's mind, and then a gentle smile appeared on her face. Of course. Oh, Qin Mu responded in a long voice, and then added. I like white tigers. Huh, the woman in white frowned, feeling unhappy. For some reason, when she saw Qin Mu's eyes, a chill arose in her heart. Especially the look in the other person's eyes, it's like looking at prey. It felt as if she had been stripped naked and presented in front of the other person's eyes without any reservation, which made her feel cold all over. The rumors are indeed true, the Lord of Qin, Qin Mu, is a lustful and foolish king. The woman in white was so angry that she bit her silver teeth secretly. She wished she could slap him in the face, pluck out the opponent's eyes with her fingers, throw them to the ground and stomp on them. Behind the woman in white, the woman wearing men's clothing, Xiaozhao, also looked at Qin Mu with a wary expression. She had already warned her young lady to be careful with Qin Mu and not to get her involved. It's a pity that the other party didn't listen to her dissuasion at all, so this was a good time and fell directly into Qin Mu's clutches. If Qin Mu was too weak, she would never have such worries, but the other party was too strong. This made Xiaozhao's inner uneasiness continue to grow. No. The young lady must not fall into the clutches of this lecherous king. Xiaozhao pursed his lips tightly and stood silently beside the young lady, ready to sacrifice himself at any time to save the young lady. The woman in white seemed to sense Xiaozhao's emotional changes, and she gently moved her hand behind her back to signal her not to act rashly. Then she smiled gently and looked at Qin Mu. Her eyes were neither indifferent nor distant, everything was just right. Since His Majesty likes White Tiger, it's the best thing. It shows that we are destined. The woman in white smiles beautifully, and her angelic face reveals unparalleled charm and temptation. This look is simply enchanting. In that case. Qin Mu paused, then suddenly raised his eyes to look at the woman in white, with a slight curve in the corner of his mouth. Can I verify it first? The woman in white frowned even deeper when she heard this. She didn't understand what Qin Mu meant by this. Could it be that she wanted to transform herself into a white tiger to show him? Thinking of this, the smile on the woman in white's face faded slightly, and a coldness flashed in her eyes. Do you consider yourself his pet? Transform if you want? The woman in white began to feel angry in her heart. She was sincere enough, but the other party teased her with a few words. Do you really think that she is a soft persimmon like those saints? Of course it is guaranteed to be fake, but verification is not necessary. No one in this world dares to impersonate me, the White Tiger clan. The woman in white replied coldly. Seeing this, the smile on Qin Mu's face became thicker and he said with a smile, "It's easy to talk, we have a long time to come." The woman in white was silent and stared at Qin Mu. She always felt that Qin Mu's words and sentences were all weird, as if they had a deep meaning, but she didn't know what the meaning was. Human language is so complex. Since she couldn't figure it out, the woman in white chose to skip the topic and asked, "I also have a question, are you really the Emperor of Qin?" Even now, she still has some doubts. Is the man opposite really the Lord of Qin? Why he could cultivate to such an extent at such a young age is simply like a fantasy, and people cannot believe it. Qin Mu smiled and said, "What? Could it be that I don't look like him?" As he spoke, he stretched out his right hand and caressed his face. That flawless and handsome face shines under the sunlight, like an immortal descending into the world. The woman in white was slightly startled. That handsome and flawless face came into her eyes, making her heart skip a beat. One thing she said was that she had never seen such a perfect skin. It can be called the appearance of a god and a devil. The woman in white's eyes flickered and she continued, "It's not that it's not like that, but it's a bit unexpected." Qin Mu smiled slightly, "I should be the one who is surprised. Your White Tiger clan suddenly came to visit and help me capture these intruders. What do you want to do? Do you want to please me?" Although Qin Mu speculated like this, he only said it in words, and in his heart he never believed that the White Tiger clan would come to please him. The White Tiger clan is of the bloodline of divine beasts, and they are so proud. How can they please a human being? Unless they have other intentions, maybe they have other motives. As expected, the woman in white shook her head and explained. "Your Majesty has misunderstood. I, the White Tiger clan, have never thought about who I want to be loyal to. I just want to cooperate with your Majesty. I see Chang'an City is in trouble, so I just want to help." "Cooperation?" Qin Mu asked with interest, "What do you plan to cooperate with me, Great Qin? Or what do you want to get from me?" "At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 370. Seeing that Qin Mu had shown a strong interest, the woman in white was certain that as long as Qin Mu was interested in this, then this matter would be a sure thing. The woman in white smiled slightly and said softly, "This place is not suitable for discussion, why don't we change places?" But who knew that Qin Mu was not moved at all, just looked at her indifferently, and did not show any signs of moving his feet. Such an attitude made the woman in white frown, and her eyes gradually narrowed as she looked at Qin Mu. The jade hand hidden in the sleeve slowly clenched into a fist, and the momentum around her gradually rose, becoming more and more dangerous. Qin Mu seemed to be unaware of the sharp aura emanating from her body, and remained motionless, with a playful smile on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes unscrupulously swept the woman in white. After a moment, Qin Mu finally looked away and said indifferently, "Not everyone in my great Qin can cooperate, even if it is the sacred beast White Tiger. If you want to cooperate, then let me see your sincerity first. I still don't know your name." The woman in white hadn't spoken yet. Xiao Zhao behind her couldn't bear it anymore after hearing this. She jumped out and pointed at Qin Mu and shouted, "Hey, what do you mean? Do you look down on our White Tiger clan?" "Oh," Qin Mu turned his head and looked at her, "you are very courageous." "Humph. Do you think our White Tiger clan is those despicable human races? Don't try to humiliate my young lady." Xiao Zhao snorted coldly, her pretty face was covered with frost, and she looked at Qin Mu with a hint of disdain. She knew the young lady's temper best. She was arrogant and noble. How could a human being insult her? Even if the other party was a quasi-emperor, it would still be far behind the foundation of the White Tiger clan. As a member of the ancient lost divine beast clan, Xiao Zhao has a high sense of identity and pride. For humans and other races, they are born with a sense of superiority. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes, with a half-smile on his lips, and his eyes swept around Xiao Zhao, and finally fell on the woman in white. Your servant seems to be quite protective of you, but it's a pity that he is a little silly, and his taste in clothes is not very good. At most, I can only give him 70 points. Xiao Zhao listened to Qin Mu's comments on her, as if he was evaluating an artifact, and was immediately furious. Who are you saying is a little silly, who are you saying has a bad taste in clothes? Qin Mu glanced at her lightly and said casually, I'm talking about you, what's wrong? You are a girl, but you dress like a man, which is totally out of place, and it's the opposite of Tiangang. Xiao Zhao was so angry that her face turned red, and her little fists were clenched tightly. She has been the most loyal supporter of the young lady since she was a child, and she never thought that someone would bully her young lady one day. But now this person not only teases her young lady in public, but also humiliates her openly. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and continued, are you originally a man? But you failed when you transformed, so you became like a woman? Come, let me see if there is any hope. Listening to Qin Mu's increasingly outrageous words, Xiao Zhao's inner anger instantly burned to the top of her head. He is still the leader of a country, and he speaks so shamelessly in public. And Qin Mu's voice was not concealed, and the whole Chang'an city heard the sentence at this time. Xiao Zhao could even hear the monks in Chang'an city pointing and talking about her. She had never suffered such humiliation. The little volcano in Xiao Zhao's heart finally erupted, and she was about to rush forward with her fists clenched, but the voice of the woman in white rang in her ears. Xiao Zhao, she warned coldly, back off. After being reminded by her own lady, Xiao Zhao realized her own misconduct and immediately lowered her head and said, I was wrong, please punish me, lady. The woman in white stopped Xiao Zhao and then looked at Qin Mu, this is my personal maid. I like to make trouble. I hope your majesty will not blame me. After that, the woman in white bowed slightly to Qin Mu to express her apology. Miss, you don't have to apologize to him. Xiao Zhao gritted her teeth unwillingly. Miss is obviously not wrong, why should she apologize to this human, why can he bear the apology of the lady? The woman in white waved her hand to stop Xiao Zhao from continuing to speak. She looked at Qin Mu, and a trace of inquiry appeared in her calm eyes. Your Majesty is indeed qualified to let me tell you my name. My name is Xuanhuan. Qin Mu looked at Xuanhuan and said indifferently, Xuanhuan. Yes, Xuanhuan nodded slightly. It's a good name, but what about your sincerity, Qin Mu said casually. Xuanhuan smiled elegantly, then waved her hand lightly, and the fairy Yuetian, who was trapped in a transparent cage beside her, flew over instantly. Before the tearful fairy Yuetian could figure out what was going on, she was captured by Xuanhuan. Your Majesty, what do you think of this sincerity? Xuanhuan's tone was soft and pleasant, like the sound of nature. Fairy Yuetian opened her eyes wide in fear and struggled desperately, but it was useless. She had to look up at Qin Mu and begged, please, let me go. Feng Lingyun, who was also trapped in a transparent cage on the other side, also showed worry and extreme resentment when he saw this scene. But because of the fear in his heart, he opened his mouth several times, but he didn't have the courage to curse out the dirty words in his mouth. The scene of Qin Mu punishing a group of saints just now really scared him. Therefore, no matter how unwilling and aggrieved he was, he could only watch Fairy Yuetian fall into the control of others. Feng Lingyun bit his back teeth tightly, and felt that everything he saw was a green light. All this was thanks to Qin Mu. Feng Lingyun's eyes were red, and he stared at Qin Mu viciously. If his eyes could kill, he would have cut Qin Mu into pieces long ago. Fairy Yuetian was also desperate. This moment finally came. She was finally going to become the plaything of the lustful and tyrant in front of her. Thinking of this, a line of clear tears flowed down her eyes, across her delicate face, and finally fell into the dust. She slowly closed her eyes and silently endured the pain that was about to come. However, Qin Mu in front of her was not as ugly and ferocious as she imagined, which was a lucky thing. Fairy Yuetian had all kinds of emotions surging in her heart, which was extremely complicated. However, Qin Mu didn't even look at her, his eyes were fixed on Xuanhuan, and he said lightly, "Is this considered sincerity? Do you think I am a garbage collector?" Fairy Yuetian. Xuanhuan shook her head, a faint smile bloomed on her beautiful face, and she said gently, "Of course it's not that simple." After the voice fell, she summoned Feng Lingyun's transparent cage with her bare hands, and Feng Lingyun flew over instantly. "Your Majesty must have seen the relationship between him and Fairy Yuetian. If I'm not mistaken, Your Majesty should be very interested, right?" Qin Mu shook his head and smiled, looking at Xuanhuan with a hint of coldness and teasing. "No, you guessed wrong, I'm actually more interested in you." Before the voice fell, Xuanhuan's eyes changed slightly.